In a groundbreaking move, 115 CEOs from South Africa's leading companies have pledged their skills to the government, aiming to confront urgent national issues. This commitment spans energy, logistics, and security concerns, reflecting a collective push for inclusive growth. It also comes at a time when unemployment is hitting sky-high figures between 32.9% and 42.4%, with the H1 2023 project listing for fixed investments in South Africa seeing a dramatic decline from an annualized 248.5 billion rand in 2022 to 173.1 billion this year. This initiative, backed by the CEO's pledge, holds the promise of rejuvenating business confidence, boosting investment, and addressing unemployment. Now, with a firm endorsement from President Ramaphosa, this partnership emerges as a beacon of hope for South Africa's economic renaissance. Joining me now is Bonang Mohale. He's the President, Business Unity South Africa. He's also the chairman of two listed entities, the Bidvest Group Limited and ArcelorMittal and SPV Services. Bonang, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, my dear sister Talu.
So it seems very obvious, because we've been following some of the economic travails of South Africa, that the administration of President Ramaphosa has really struggled to get a handle on dealing with the country's economic challenges. And for businesses operating in the country, I think it's a good place for us to establish just how difficult or how bad things have been. So take us through the challenges that businesses themselves have been experiencing that has now led to this pledge.
It is fair to say that all of us are absolutely aligned that in the last 15 years of our 29-year democracy, we are now on a slippery slide to a slope of misery and wasteland. And yet we know that South Africa's potential bears so much, not just for South Africa, but for the rest of the continent. Some of the challenges are, number one, the persistent load shedding with increasing severity and increasing frequency. That wiped off 560 billion last year at stage 6. We lose 4 billion a day between stages, 500 million rands. We have wiped off an entire 2 percentage points per annum. And yet in the last 15 years, the economy has not grown by more than 2 percentage points. And the population growth is 1.5%, which means that we're not going anywhere fast. In fact, we are going backwards as measured by discretionary purchasing power and disposable income. But also, we are now holding the world record for all the wrong reasons. We now the most unequal society in the world, having taken over from Brazil in 2010 with a Gini coefficient of 0.63. And when we talk about inequality, really it's income inequality. We don't even factor wealth, let alone asset inequality, because if we did, it will be far worse. We also have the highest unemployment rate in the world associated with countries at war at almost 43% with an expanded definition, 33% with a narrow definition, excluding those that have not been looking for a job in the last 36 months. But also, we have the highest youth unemployment rate in the world. We have the highest SME as an acronym for small and medium enterprises. I exclude micro because it is survivalist in the world. Highest GBV, gender-based violence and femicide in the world, not by a factor of 2, but 5 times the global average. So it's very difficult for business to just survive, let alone thrive in that environment. This is not the first initiative we've taken as business, because we have said, if South Africa is going to work, it is because business has decided that South Africa will indeed work. What would we be looking for the next 2024, both national and provincial elections, for any party that will partner with us as business? Number one, we are looking for ethical leadership. Number two, we're looking for service delivery, because that's the one that has been suffering. We are looking for transformation. This economy must look like us. It is unacceptable that big business is still primarily white and prosperous, and small business is still largely black and struggling. And of course, we'll be looking for a party that commits itself to law and order, safety and security, so that we can reverse this notion of having the second highest suicide rate in the world just after Russia. My dear sister Talu?
Bonang, that's a lot that you've reeled out in terms of, and I like the fact that you also took it a bit politically as South Africa prepares for elections, that business is being very deliberate and intentional about what it's opening itself up to when it comes to the political parties. And you've listed the issues, load shedding, unemployment, gender-based violence as well. You have other issues that have been targeting, unfortunately, cost pressures, also adding to the situation of the economy in South Africa. So you've said this is not the first initiative where business has come forward to say, we can help, we want to help, let us help. So Bonang, just quickly take us through how this pledge, how this situation of 115 CEOs pledging to help revive the South African economy came about. Just very quickly before we move on.
So first, only business understands this notion of project management, how to deliver mega projects on time, on budget, and in full. Governments the world over are struggling. They budget X, they finish at 4 times X, and indeed the duration has doubled, if not quadrupled. We partnered with government during the vaccine rollout as a response to the pandemic. We partnered with government on the 29th of January this year when we said we are going to invest in these 5 areas. With or without your support, government is better with your support. We have worked on things like Operation Vulindlela. We have worked on easing the backlog in immigrations, for instance, but also around the issues of energy. Now, our energy has been with us probably for 15 years, since February 2015. And we have identified not 5 this time, because business is very good at focusing, just 3 areas that we started with at the beginning. Energy, because it is indeed the 4th means of production, when land is the paramount means of production. Secondly, on the infrastructure, because we need to move goods and services to where they are needed, but also law and order, safety and security, because without law and order, safety and security, who are we and what are we? And let me end, my dear sister Tolu, by saying, it's very clear to us that we were so eager to assume our political freedom that we didn't spend enough time thinking deeply and profoundly about what is it that we're going to do when we get this political freedom, particularly in changing the system of the economy. It can be that 29 years into democracy, poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face. And also some of the initiatives that we have agitated and orchestrated for is the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, because it has robbed South Africans of their hope. Now we sit in a position where we have the lowest level of confidence, hope, and trust since the Second World War. My dear sister Tolu.
So you're saying a lot, and you're telling us a lot, because there's so much background in terms of the situation that's happening in South Africa. You've taken us into the key areas: energy, logistics, and security concerns. But I think the question that many people would also have on their mind is that in terms of this pledge, which is being described as a concrete commitment that's going to drive change in these key sectors, what are the specific actions, the strategies that you believe are going to have significant impact on resolving these particular issues in those key sectors that you're focusing on? And again, there is a bit of concern, because in reading up about this, as you mentioned sometimes in this last answer, that you sort of assume some roles beyond a bit of what government was doing without government support. You told governments, with or without your support, we would do this. There are concerns that not necessarily usurping government's responsibilities, but you're taking on a bit too much of the things that are meant for business, for rather government itself to handle in collaboration with business. So how do you respond to that concern? And then in terms of the key strategies and even specific actions for these sectors, what do we expect in the coming weeks and months with this particular pledge from CEOs across South Africa?
Tolu, we don't have a choice. We are the only country in Africa that became free and did not do the 2 things. 1, accelerate the education of its people dramatically. Secondly, ensure the ownership of the business and the economy by its black people by double digit. We have failed on both of those issues. Therefore, as business, we are saying we need to ensure that we grow our own timber. Instead of looking at government to give us the skills of today and tomorrow, we better cultivate and produce our own skills. Secondly, we are saying business itself, because it employs more people than government, if it is transformed, then South Africa will be transformed. Therefore, we're asking our members to stop certain things. Stop fronting, stop bribing, stealing, and cheating, stop resisting transformation. In fact, be much more visionary, because it's when business says we need entrepreneurship because we want this economy to look like us. It needs to be broadly reflective of the demographics. There's 65 million South Africans, 51% are women, and yet women's representation in positions of leadership, C-suite I'm talking about, is less than 24%. African women, less than 4%. And yet we know that when you put a smartphone in the hands of women, not only does the education, nutrition, and education of their own children improve, but of the entire society and indeed community from which they come. 8 of the 198 countries that were afflicted by the pandemic that dealt better with this COVID-19 were led by women, versus those that are not led by women.
Yeah.
Especially in South Africa, it's a public holiday today, it's a National Women's Day, it's a Women's Month. I think we need to stop talking about gender equality and pay parity and start talking about gender social justice. My dear sister Tolu.
Thank you so much for that. And I also like the angle you're bringing in on that. But because of time, I'll only be able to ask one more question. And I'll need this answer quite briefly. A pledge is only as good as its redemption. And of course, you've talked about this is not the first initiative you've had. The success of business and working with the presidency and with the governments, particularly for the vaccine rollout for COVID-19 and other situations. But again, a pledge is only as good as its redemption. So are there timelines? Are there checkpoints in place? How do you assure the success of these pledges, the success of the actions, the strategies, whatever is mandated that will be coming with the pledges that 115 CEOs across South Africa had made in order to help the presidency, the administration, the government revive the South African economy?
A precedent has been set. The reason why we were so successful in the vaccine rollout is because we set ourselves clear, measurable, specific targets. We met daily. We insisted that the president releases the statistics every evening. Now we're meeting with the president weekly. There are milestones. There are role definition and clarification. There's a piece for government. There's a piece for business. There's a piece for civil society. There's also a piece for labor, because we need a social accord to make sure that South Africa works. So we're meeting with the president weekly. We're doing only 3 things. We are measuring progress. We have also devolved this lower down to the executives in the department, the director generals, but also the individual ministers, the Minister of Labor, the Minister of Department of Trade, Industry, and Competition, but most importantly, the Minister of Public Enterprises, because Transnet and Eskom, those are the ones that are looking after our energy and logistics, which is the backbone of this economy. Of the more than 734 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies, 28 of them are bigger than most African economies. Therefore, we should not let this economy die in our hands. My dear sister Tolu.
Thank you so much, Bonang. I know that this is a progressive journey and a progressive conversation. So as you are also making progress and hitting timelines and milestones, we hope to be touching base with you. We've been very focused on the South African economy, the continent's most industrialized. And we know that the success of South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt even leads also to more success for the whole continent. Bonang, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for having me, my dear sister.
All right.